This is the Smart Girl's Guide to Real Estate with Jamie Hearn, your invitation to start building wealth on your terms. From first deals to big empires, this podcast will help smart girls invest smarter.
Hi, and welcome to the Smart Girl's Guide to Real Estate. I'm Jamie Hearn. Today we're going to chat about long-term holds. This is a facet of the market that is relatively easy to access. Lots of people will do what's called a house hack. So that's a really creative way to obtain a property at very little out of pocket. I actually taught my 19-year-old son how to do this, and he closed on his first house a couple of days before his 20th birthday. So the process is you purchase a 2, 3, 4 family. Usually you go with up to a 4 family because once you exceed 4 units, it technically becomes a commercial property. So it's a different financing process. When you purchase 4 units or below, it's considered a residential mortgage. And when you're buying in a traditional way, that's the ideal way to house hack because you can sometimes qualify for programs that allow you to only bring a few dollars to the closing table instead of the traditional requisite 20% or more if you were purchasing a property under other circumstances. So when you purchase, let's say, a 3 family, you rent out the other units and live in the remaining unit. So the design is that the rents collected from the other units allow you to subsidize, or in some cases, fully pay for your mortgage, your taxes, and your insurance. So this is called house hacking. And this is a really great way for people to get into the long-term hold market for not a lot of money out of pocket. We're going to talk about numerous creative financing techniques over the next couple of months. So this is just one technique to get into the market, but it's a really effective one. The key is if you do an FHA loan, you have to live in that property as your principal residence for a year, and then you can do it again. So if you are covering your mortgage with the other units in your home, after that year's time, you turn around and do it again. Now that initial property is cash flow positive. You do it again with a second property, and you have the other units again subsidizing or covering your mortgage. You have cash flow positive from the first property you bought flowing into the newer property you bought. It's likely that you're going to have cash in your pocket or be paid for all of your living expenses covered with additional revenue coming in. So these are just some of the techniques that I've taught my kids, I've learned over the years. And I think back, if I had known this 30 years ago, what a different trajectory I would be on. So I really want to share this knowledge with as many people as possible because it's life-changing and it's never too late to start. There are always going to be opportunities to get into the market, and whether you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, now's the time. Just because you didn't do it when you were younger, maybe it means you weren't ready, or maybe it means that you had other things you had to accomplish first. But now's the time. If you feel the itch to get involved in real estate, follow it. Don't hesitate because you think, it's too hard to get in. It costs too much money to get in. I'm too old. None of those things are true unless you allow them to be true. If you believe that, that's probably the experience you're going to have. But if you make the decision that you can, you can. So I'm happy to share any insights or guidance. If you're interested in exploring something like house hacking, feel free to reach out and I will guide you in whatever way I possibly can. House hacking is just one small little facet of long-term holds, however. Long-term holds can look like multifamily apartment buildings. They can look like single-family dwellings. They can be duplexes. They can be mobile home parks. They can be RV parks. Anything that you're holding for more than a year. My position is when I buy a long-term hold, I buy it with the intention of retaining it. Unless there is some compelling reason for me to liquidate that asset down the road, I'm planning to utilize that asset for cash flow. And as equity accrues in that asset, I will cash out the equity and use that equity, which is effectively tax-free because it's debt. It's not income. I'll use that equity to purchase another cash flowing asset, rinse and repeat. Long-term holds are a long-term play. It's not something that you're going to make $1 million in the first 6 months of holding. Generally, cash flows are not huge, but you have to have a certain threshold. I have purchased properties that don't have positive cash flow. They're break even. I've bought them for other reasons, however. Sometimes I need the depreciation if there was a big income event for me in a certain year. Buying a long-term hold allows me to access certain depreciation that I wouldn't otherwise have as a tax deduction. There are a ton of additional pieces to that approach. So make sure if you're considering that, you consult someone who understands your tax situation and what the benefits of purchasing real estate are, because there are tons of them. But make sure you have a little bit of guidance on that and don't just go wild, because you have to have certain other boxes checked in order to utilize that depreciation. But that's been the motivating factor for me in certain deals to purchase properties that don't cash flow, knowing that those properties are going to appreciate. So in 5, 7, 10 years, they're going to be cash flowing, and I will have the opportunity to access some of the equity in those properties. If I choose to sell them, I may have a tax obligation from that, or I can do what's called a 1031 exchange, which means I take the taxable income, the capital gain that I would have had to report on my tax return, and I roll that over into another property. The property has to be like kind, so I can't do it with things that are completely different. There are a lot of rules around that. You can do single family to a multifamily. You can do a multifamily to a mobile home park. You can do commercial. So there's some flexibility, but I couldn't do a business into a commercial property. So you just want to know that what you're envisioning fits within the rules. And that process allows you to defer the capital gain exposure that you would have from selling an asset. One of the really important rules around that is that you can never have the money in your account or your hand in between closings. So if you list property A for sale, at closing, that money has to go into escrow with a 1031 agent or a title company. And then that money can't come out of escrow until closing for property B. So there are certain timeframes that you have to comply with the 1031 rules. This isn't a class on 1031s, but I wanted to mention it for any of you who may be considering selling a property, because it's useful information. And all you have to know is, I think I want to check out whether a 1031 is a good fit for this situation, and go research it. Go find people who have the knowledge and ask the questions then. You don't have to become an expert yourself. So I've gone down a bunch of rabbit holes today, but some of this information is potentially new information to you. So if you do have a question on any of those little rabbit holes that we've mentioned today, don't hesitate to reach out. Long-term holds are a great way to be in the real estate market. It is also important, if you have long-term rental holds, that you have a proper structure and that you're not owning them all in your individual name, because there's some significant liability associated with that. When I was first practicing law, I was practicing near a university, and a client came into the firm I was working at, and they said, "Oh, this is a pretty simple file, pass it off to the new girl," which is me. So I had a conversation with this guy. He owned a bunch of rental properties where college students were living in his own name. And I said, "Hey, buddy, you have some exposure. You've got a lot of equity in these properties. Let's at least get them transferred to an LLC." So got everything in order, LLC set up. He had an appointment to come in and sign the deeds to transfer the properties into the LLC and start to get things buttoned up. He canceled his appointment because he was going on vacation. It wasn't convenient for him to come in and sign deeds. Before he got back to sign those deeds, there was a fire at the property, and someone fell off the porch, like third-story porch, trying to get out of the fire and died. So this guy ended up having a ton of exposure, which is like absolutely horrific, of course. And he could have insulated himself and allowed his commercial insurance policy to compensate the family. Instead, the family pursued him personally. So there's so many little things that can protect you from that kind of exposure. It's just really important to make sure that your structure is proper, in place, and executed. You also want to check it every now and then with a qualified professional to make sure that it fits your current needs. As our holdings evolve, our businesses evolve, our lives evolve, it is always important to check back and make sure that things still serve you in the way that you had anticipated when you originally set them up. That's it for today. I will be back to talk more about the intricacies and the approaches and different techniques to investing in real estate so you can get involved in real estate as soon as you want. I'll see you soon. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Girl's Guide to Real Estate. If you loved today's episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share it with another smart girl who's ready to build generational wealth.